Good morning, everyone. We are going to take just the next moment just to let everyone get settled, but we are planning to start here sharp at 10 a.m. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Western Sponsorship Congress virtual session. I'm Erin Gablish, and I am going to be your host today. We are very disappointed that we are not delivering this Alberta Forum 2020 to you in person, but we are very grateful to the team at TimeWise that they've put together these series of virtual sessions. I know the thing that's always been most dear to me about the Congress is the ability to come together with our peers and really learn and talk about the issues that are crucial to our industry. So I know that's going to happen today with Brent's presentation. We have just a few housekeeping items to go over before we kick off the presentation today. So we are using Zoom webinar. So what that means is that your camera and your audio is not turned on. So no need to worry about that. It looks like most people have, but if you haven't done it so far, if you don't mind going into Zoom and just renaming and making sure that your first and last name is in Zoom, it just helps with us on the presentation today. And it just really helps, especially for the Q&A as they're coming in so that we know who's asking the questions. Speaking about Q&A, so we are encouraging you guys to ask questions throughout Brent's presentations. So no need to hold those questions till the end. We are going to be monitoring the questions as they're coming in. So we are going to be interrupting Brent during his presentation and making sure that those questions that you've got top of mind are going to be addressed. All right, so I think we're ready to get going. I just want to say that I am truly honored to be the one hosting today and as well as introducing Brent. I've known Brent for a very long time, and he's been not only a mentor, but a very dear friend of mine. And I've learned a lot from him, and I know we will as well today. So for those of you that do not know Brent, Brent Barutis is the President CEO of Partnership Group, Sponsorship Specialist. They are based right here in Alberta, and he oversees a team that works with brands, properties, really to help deliver ROI for his clients. We all know that a lot has changed in the last 8 or 9 months, but these have actually created some really great opportunities and innovations for us. And Brent's going to go through those with us today, not only so we can be capitalizing on them today, but carrying those into 2021 and beyond. So without further ado, Brent, over to you.
Thanks very much, Erin. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to Brent and Arlene and the whole team at TimeWise for making this happen. I'm just going to bring the screen up here and the opportunity to be here. So thanks everybody that's on this call and the opportunity to share some time together. As you all know, the session this morning is going to be, or this afternoon, depending on where you are in our country. It's called A New Reality: Sponsorship Today, Tomorrow, and the Future. And the reason I chose to look at it from that way is that it has been a tumultuous past 8 or 9 months. It's been incredibly unsettling for everybody. And my hope is that at this point in time, there's no need to dwell on the past. And this session is not going to look at historically what's happened over the last 9 months from a sponsorship perspective, but where we're going, how to manage it today, how to manage it tomorrow, and how to manage it in the future. I'm very excited to be delivering this initial session out of the 6 opportunities that are available on the virtual side, and anticipating and excited about the being on site in Edmonton again in November next year, 2021, at Fantasyland Hotel at West Edmonton Mall, and making that come live to you there. I also want to thank Erin, a good friend and a wonderful person, and so extremely knowledgeable in our sector, for being the moderator, for being the host of this for this whole series, which is great. So thanks very much. My contact information, just my title, as Erin had said, and if you want to be sharing it all throughout this session, of course, as Erin mentioned, be sure to be typing in the questions in the Q&A, she will have, she'll assimilate all those and ask them at the end, or if it's something urgent, she'll interrupt me throughout the session. But if you want to share on Twitter, you want to share on any of the channels that you want to be using, I encourage you to use the hashtag sponsorship reality and hashtag WSC_forum, so that all those out there in your network can also see if you're sharing information that you're taking away today. So I encourage you to be doing that. This is my contact information. If you want to reach me, you will have access to this video afterwards, this presentation. So if you want to take a shot of that right now, or you want to just wait till afterwards when you get the video and you can pull it up. But my email's there. LinkedIn's the best platform for me on the social side, and then Twitter, and then I am also on Instagram, but more on a personal side than the professional. So that's sort of the housekeeping part for me. And I just want to talk now about the fact that, yeah, our world has changed. The game has changed of sponsorship. It's so much different today than it was 9 months ago. And what I've developed and designed for you today is to look at what this new reality looks like, what to expect in sponsorship for today, for tomorrow, and the future.
Hey, Brent, really, sorry to interrupt you. Your screen is not sharing, so we can't see your presentation.
Oh, really? Okay. So let's go back and see why that might be. And I am guessing, oops, just give me 1 sec here. Let's try this. Is that sharing now?
There you go. Yep.
All right. So I'm just going to whip through these first several videos or slides, because you've already heard everything I had to say around them. The fact that this is the title, that's my information. I would encourage you to use hashtag sponsorship reality or hashtag WSC forum, and that will be able to share on whatever channels you want on social media. Also, those are my contact information. If you want my email, as I said before, LinkedIn's the best platform for me to be reacting to you or connecting with you on a more immediate basis from a social perspective. I also spend some time on Twitter and some time, but not as much, on Instagram. As I said, the world has changed dramatically over the last 9 months, and that's what we're going to look at today. And we're going to specifically look at this new reality of what to expect, and that would be sponsorship, how it happens to be today, what it's going to look like tomorrow, what you need to be doing, and where that's going to take us in the future. What I've done is developed, really, as I said, 5 realities for going forward. I'm just going to recap those 5 right now, and then we'll get into them a little bit more. Number 1 is the reality of understanding our audiences today. We need to be understanding our audiences way more in depth today than we ever have in the past. We need to look at the reality of virtual. It is a different world. Where we are with virtual and digital today is light years ahead of where most of us were 9 months ago. The third thing is we want to look at the relationship reality in this new norm. And we're going to delve into that a little bit. We're going to look at creativity and innovation and the reality check around that. And finally, a reality check around acquiring advice. And then finally, after we've gone through those 5, I'm going to dispel a couple of myths that exist out there. But to start with, I want you to understand that there really is, that what you need to look at is that there truly is, as we go forward, there's a necessity to recognize there is a need to change, to adapt, and to be fluid over these next 18 to 36 months in our sponsorship world. If you take nothing else away from this session, I want you to take this slide away. Understand that there is a huge need to change, to adapt, and to be fluid. I keep hearing from people, oh, well, I'm not sure what it's going to look like when my event happens in January or in March or in July. Don't worry about that, because you have to be fluid. You have to be able to adapt, and you have to be able to change, because who knew in September that we were going to have lockdowns like we have right now? That was, everybody knew that there was going to be a second wave, but we got pretty complacent. And that's affected our sponsorship world as a result too. Sports that were happening are gone. Arts organizations that were running at smaller levels, they're gone. Those sponsors aren't getting that. This is March, April, May all over again. So if you take nothing else away, understand that over the next 36 months, you need to be able to change, to adapt, and be fluid. So when I look at that, let's go into these 5. And the first one is understanding our audiences. That is the most critical part because it's different. When we used to look at it, we'd look at trying to understand our consumers, but we have to know them even better than we ever have before. We need to understand those ultimate purchase person. So if we're a property, our direct client is the sponsor, our other direct client is our audience, and sometimes there are indirect audiences through our sponsors. So we need to understand who that consumer is, and we need to understand their situation today more than ever before. But that also goes to your partners. We have to understand our partners' situations, their goals, their objectives, what they're trying to achieve. Those are all our audiences. And we need to also shift away from that thinking about it's all about you and your property. It's all about you and your brand if you're a sponsor. It needs to understand that a shift in thinking needs to move towards that belief and the desire to know more about our audiences. The more in depth, the more research we have, the more we'll be able to adapt, be fluid, and change to meet those needs. When we look at the fact that the corporate social responsibility, especially in the first part of these 9 months of COVID that we've gone through, it's all been a shift into corporate social responsibility. How can we give back to the community? Who needs help? The sponsors are saying, and the great properties are saying the same thing. How can we help? Who needs help? What can we do? And we've seen a shift in corporate sponsorship dollars into CSR type things around a PPE collection, PPE delivery to our healthcare workers. On top of that, the food recovery and food banks, those sorts of things. The recent Elevant study from Relevant Elevant agency in Montreal shows that 72% of Canadians believe that sponsors are making a positive contribution to the experience of events. So it's important that we continue to be sponsors and we understand what our sponsors are trying to achieve so that we can help them so that they can be recognized in the community. That same study showed that 3/4 of Canadians actually believe that sponsors improve their own image when they're associated to some of these events, and in this case, helping out in the COVID scenario. So we need to find out what our partners need. And if you're a brand, what is it that our property needs? What are their goals right now? How is it different? And how can we make a difference to help them? And the most interesting part in that study by Elevant is the fact that it identifies that consumers, corporate social responsibility, CSR, is the most prevalent or has the highest recall and understanding in the age group 16 to 34. That's our youngest generation. And that's 73% of that demographic have truly understand the importance and the role of CSR in our community. So they are looking at it and saying, is that brand helping those that are in need of help? And that's why we have to understand who we can help and how we can help them. The age groups 35, 54 and 55 plus, only 65% of recall is there for that. So this is the first of those 5. And when we look at it, we also have to understand that there is no key there's been a shift change from that we just need to know about their sociographics or their demographics or how much money they make. That's what we used to think was important. But today we need to know how they feel. Today we need to know what these people and these consumers, whether those consumers are for a property, if that's our sponsor, or whether it's the ultimate consumer, our fans, our subscribers, those sorts of things. we need to know about them in depth. How are they suffering? How are they feeling good? What are their issues? And by doing that, we can build stronger programs for them and help our sponsors to reach them better. We need to understand that greater shift is happening from a transactional opportunity to truly an integrated partnership. And that partnership goes beyond the property and the sponsor. It goes all the way through to that consumer as well. This means we need to understand the consumer. And I just use the example, if I'm a property and I have a travel agency or an airline that has, like Air Canada vacations or something like that, when we start to look at that side, and if they've got great opportunities and programs, we need to sit down with them and say, we need to stop promoting or planning and showing what can happen for somebody for a vacation to happen in spring break in March. That's not going to happen probably. We need to be thinking about the consumers and their trust in travel, their trust in other countries or even our own country to be safe for travel. So if we want to promote travel, we need to be talking about and setting the image for 24 months from now or 12 months from now at best. So don't allow ourselves to be talking to our audiences about things that are not going to happen immediately. We need to look down the road and be realistic. And it's understanding, delivering, and communicating about safety today, tomorrow, and in the future, and letting them know what we are doing as a property or we as a brand are doing from a safety perspective. So the second one I want to look at, the second of these 5 pivots, is the virtual world. And when we really look at it, we're going to look at the virtual world of events, engagement, and activations. And what this is all about is, and it shouldn't come as any surprise because we're on a virtual conference or a virtual webinar right now that is in turn providing some value added because the real event couldn't happen. The real event didn't exist and it's been postponed right till November 2021. But this is what I talked about at the beginning, the fluidity and the ability to change. And TimeWise has done a great job with that. And their sponsors have been integrated into not only these virtual webinars, but also into next year. So when we look at virtual, and I don't care whether it's events or whether it's engagement with our audiences or whether it's direct activations, we need to understand that what we're doing virtually today, like this scenario, is not going to disappear when the world returns to normal. That this is going to be part of the new norm, where you were never doing virtual conferences, where you really weren't doing any sort of virtual activations, your digital activations, you were doing everything on site. Well, when you are back to doing those things on site, the virtual and digital world is going to be integrated into that. When we start to look at those sorts of things, we need to look at what elements of those are really going to make a difference and what can we do? Well, the digital and virtual world provides us with some amazing opportunities. The data that we can generate through a virtual experience with our sponsors or as an event, whether it's a gala gone virtual, whether it's a walk gone virtual, whether it's a sporting event gone virtual, sponsors have way more data they can use, way more understanding of the audience, way easier to now be able to target a message specifically to a consumer in a way that's time effective and also important and applicable. We couldn't do that before. We looked at those people, those 350 people sitting out front as somebody was talking on stage, as a sponsor's on stage talking, and looking at a room of 350. Now he or she can look at the individuals that are participating. The sporting event, we can know who's won second and third screens, and we can know how we can message them directly or as a group. All of these become really important to understanding that the virtual world can deliver us so much more than we ever could before. And when we look at that, we need to stop thinking that we're going to, if we have a walk or we have a run or we have a gala, or we have any of these experiential type engaging events, we can't duplicate or replicate those. We cannot duplicate or replicate those in the virtual world. What we can do, though, is build virtual experiences or digital experiences. They might be similar, but they won't be the same. Don't think you can just transfer what you did inside a ballroom to on a virtual screen or digital delivery. You need to understand that it's clearly different about the fact that if somebody's sitting in the stands at a football game, if they're sitting in their own home, they're in a different world. And if they're watching it on a second screen or a third screen, it gives you way more opportunity as a sponsor or as a property to engage with that audience. We have to start looking at other opportunities when we start and imagine things like how can we now integrate, if we are the Toronto International Film Festival or Calgary International Film Festival or Vancouver International Film Festival or Edmonton International Film Festival, I don't care who it is, but all of a sudden, we couldn't always get those actors to be there and integrate with our sponsors or provide an access of a celebrity, whether that's a hockey player, a coach, or an actor or actress, director. We couldn't always give them access to all of our audience or to individuals within our audience or specifically to sponsors. But we can now, because that director can turn around and say, yeah, I can give you 40 minutes on a Zoom call at 3:00 on the day of the screening. Yeah, no problem at all. And now that sponsor has a chance to invite 12 of their closest or best clients into a room with the director of that film, into a virtual room in a breakout session that only those 12 people and the sponsor and the director are in. Those types of experiences, whether it's a player, whether it's a celebrity, whoever it is, those types of experiences, they exist today and didn't exist before. And our audiences are willing to be engaged on a virtual and a digital level now, where before it was, unless it was sports, it was hard to get them into that world. So when I look at the next one, and we take a look at the Zoom scenario on that, I mean, it's about that engagement and that interaction. And you can put all these people into a breakout session and have somebody of celebrity status or a sponsor working one-on-one with them. Those are things that couldn't happen before. And when we start to look at activations, you're not going to replicate sampling the way it was before COVID. Give it up. So what can we do that's different? We can ship product. We can do different things. There's lots of opportunity for us to do things from a sampling and activation perspective. When we look at the fact that, we're all living in our homes, our virtual offices, our home-based offices, that's all different today. And it's not going to probably change all that much. I had a breakfast this morning and I was talking about it with these two people. And yes, sure, their offices are still going to be around, but most businesses have said, we're not asking our staff to come back in again until March or April, or some of them until June or July or August. And after that, and I mean, we look at Shopify and companies like that have said, our employees never have to come back to the office. So when we start to look at those things, we need to understand that the virtual world is important today. It will be tomorrow in our sponsorship programs, and it will in the future. We need to be able to understand that virtual is an option that's critical now, and it's not just an option anymore. So number 3, let's look at that relationship reality. Yes, you can have a glass of wine with your partner. You can do it virtually over a Zoom call. But how can you stand out? How can you make a difference? And how can you be different in a virtual world or in this COVID world of building relationships? Well, the reality is that you need to be deepening relationships, deeper than you've ever had before. And I can tell you over the last 9 months, we've worked with a lot of clients who said they have great relationships with their clients, or they said they did in April, May, June, July. And we told them they didn't. And anybody that wants to sit down with me, send me a note and we'll take 10 minutes on the phone. I'll ask you a few questions and we'll know whether you really have a deep relationship with your clients or not. How much do you know about their business? How much do you know about their personal situation? How much do you know about their measuring of return on investment and how they're actually integrating it now? We need to understand them so much better. And that means that we have to have way, way better communication. It has to be ongoing communication. But what we know today, working from our virtual offices, is that we can look into people's homes like we've never looked into them before. So when you're talking with that partner, that brand, or that property, and the back of your living room is in the background, or your home office, or the dog's barking in the background, it's a whole different world today than it was 9 months ago. And that's allowing us to deeper understand our partners, not only in the business side, but on the personal side. And that's where we're shifting. And it needs to go even further, because if you want to be successful, that's how you're going to stand out, is by understanding your partners even better than you already have. When you stop to look at it, we had an NHL team launch their name and launch the name of their physical facility during COVID, and it worked. So yes, we can do all of these things. And those partnerships that existed when the Kraken, the Seattle Kraken, before their name was announced, the partners had to understand and trust, because they didn't know the team name would be called Kraken. They had no idea until they heard it, like everybody else on that day. And that's about a trust that exists. And when you look at somebody like Amazon paying hundreds of millions of dollars over the term of their naming right for the building, and it's not got the Amazon name in it, but it truly stands for what Amazon's all about. And that's a climate pledge. And that's why it's called Climate Pledge Arena. And that's because the Kraken and the Seattle franchise spent time with Amazon to understand what their goals are, their objectives are. And let's name the arena Climate Pledge Arena and make sure that this building meets those standards to be zero-based carbon, so that we can be in a scenario that Amazon themselves, their carbon footprint will be completely decreased by the year 2030. So these are the types of things that don't happen unless you have a deep relationship with your client. And that's where we need to go. We need to still be able to buy them a drink. We still need to be able to have lunch with them. And maybe that means sending them a lunch from their favorite restaurant while you sit in Edmonton and they sit in Toronto, and you book time with them at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time or Eastern Time, and you have a delivery by the restaurant at 11:30, so that they can have lunch while you're having a casual conversation. And maybe you don't talk business. Maybe you talk about their kids and their hockey program that's ended, or that the soccer program that's not happening, or their spouse who's dealing with other issues, and seeing how you can help them. And you do that over lunch. So yes, these things can happen. And when we integrate things like virtual reality and augmented reality into our relationships, we can create even deeper and more meaningful relationships. So the fourth thing that we really want to look at, and this is all coming up from everything else I've talked about, and that's about creativity and innovation. And for those of you that get my Tuesday morning commentary, the TMC, you will have read yesterday as I talked about some of the elements that I'm going to talk about here, and that's on the creativity and the innovation side. And if you don't get the Tuesday morning commentary, send me an email and we'll get you added to the list. It's free. So, but what we really need to look at is that creativity and innovation. It's all about technology, but it's also about capacity to deliver that technology. So when we start to look at that, the warp speed with which we have moved forward with technology for our own organizations has been incredible over the last 8 months. We were already on a trajectory. We were already moving towards technology development and maybe integrating facial recognition instead of keypad touching. It already existed in China. But today, it's becoming a necessity. So what has happened over the last 8 months, the technology advancement typically would have taken 8 years, has now happened in 8 months. So we need to be looking at that. Think about it. How many of you really knew what Teams was, Microsoft Teams, 9 months ago? How many of you on a regular basis were on a Zoom call or even knew what Zoom meant other than the Mazda commercial. So when we start to look at that, we start to look at augmented reality and things like what the Louisville Bats had done in creating a scavenger hunt to encourage people to order food from their partner restaurants and do curbside pickup. And when you did that, you could take the augmented reality app that the team provided and have Batty, their mascot, in the background of an augmented reality picture in front of that restaurant. And every time you submitted another picture of you and Batty in front of one of the participating restaurants, you were entered again in the scavenger hunt of opportunity to win food and tickets to games when you were back in the ballpark, and discounts and coupons. It was almost like a Pokemon Go scenario, but specifically for their sponsors in the food service industry to encourage people to buy from restaurants and do curbside pickup so that you could take an augmented reality picture in front of the restaurant. Those are the types of creativity and technology integrated creativity that will work. When I look at places like the Shaw Festival, they shifted into doing a lot of backyard concerts for their key patrons. But what I believe they missed was it was great to do these events of 10 or 12 or 15 people in the backyard of a benefactor or a patron. But where was the integration with their sponsors? Why weren't these being done in the boardroom or the backyard or the rooftop patio of the chartered accountant firm that's a sponsor of Shaw's Festival, or at the wineries that are abundant in the area and that are sponsors of the Shaw Festival? Why aren't we integrating those types of opportunities? Those are what we need to start looking at and integrating in there. And I talked about sampling opportunities. How can we make changes so that we can sample again? And I don't know how many of you are shopping at Costco, but I was at Costco the other day, and I live in Nanaimo. It's not a big Costco. It's not like the new fancy one in Niagara Falls, but guess what? They are sampling products again. I got to taste the guacamole on chips again, but it was in a sealed container, and everything that they're turning out and testing for or sampling is in a sealed package or a paper bag. So there's no direct touching, no crossover. So there are ways that, yes, you can sample again. It's about using gamification and creating technology to build gaming so that your audiences are actually involved in understanding more about the theater or the sports team and the stats, or research that's being done for the MS Society or whoever it is. And that gamification can allow those fans of yours or those subscribers or those donors, it can allow them to be integrated into a game and learn, but also be integrated into learning about the sponsor and their roles and what they can deliver. But the biggest problem in my mind is that too many organizations have jumped into this technology scenario and they don't have the capacity to back it up. And I watched this before COVID too, where somebody would say, oh my gosh, TikTok's the hottest thing now. We need to get on TikTok. Or they're entering into Instagram because it became so strong in the last 12 to 18 months. So in doing that, do they have the capacity to run a social program across Pinterest if they're still using it, and LinkedIn if they're using it at all, but Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now TikTok? If you don't invest in the capacity to be successful with this technology, it will fail on you. It's almost like those days where 15, 20 years ago, somebody said that you needed to build just a website for your organization, whether that's a walk, a sports team, a charity, or whatever. And so what you did was you knew Sally's third cousin's little brother's second oldest sister was a webmaster, and she, at 14 years of age, could build out your website in her basement and manage it for you until she got involved with boys and then really didn't want to do that anymore, and your website had no backup and it had no updates and everything else. In those days, not that anybody on this call would have ever done that. You would have always hired professionals to build it for you and run it for you. Don't be cheap. The most inexpensive route is probably the most expensive route in the long run. If you're going to do technology, you're going to run a augmented reality program, get the right software and make sure you have the capacity to deliver on it. If you're going to go to facial recognition, make sure you're going to do that. I think one of the best examples I've seen is you can see the picture on right there that you can purchase using a band, a wristband, and be able to go from that perspective to get access into a venue or to pay for food on a venue and have a wristband loaded with money. There's a whole bunch of options and technology that exists, but if you don't have the backup to do it, if you don't have the capacity to make it work, it will fail, and it will fail for your sponsors, and it will ensure that your sponsors don't come back. And when we start to look at these scenarios, that capacity has to be there to be able to deliver on that. And that's why if you're going to do technology, do it right. When we start to look at scenarios where that didn't happen, there's the session that Christy Cruz and I are doing in a few weeks. It would be on December 16th as part of this series of webinars. We're going to talk about some big failures and some great successes in sponsorships over the years and why they went right and why they went wrong. And I was going to use some examples, but I'm going to let you go to that session to hear all of that. But we need to be able to get the advice we need. We'll need to get the knowledge, and we're coming up to that in a minute. But it's interesting to understand that, one of the things when we look at these virtual webinars, but more importantly, virtual conferences that have the trade show scenario, well, most of the statistics that I have seen coming back, that about 43% of trade show exhibitors who went virtual will not ever go back again. Their experience didn't work. What they wanted to achieve didn't happen. And I blame that partially on the event or the trade show for not educating well enough, and maybe perceptions or expectations were wrong. That the scenario was that the situation was that exhibitor expected it to be just like a real live on the ground experience. And it's never going to be. What did come out of most of those studies, though, that showed that sponsorship of events like a conference or an event with a trade show, that it has immense return on investment for the sponsors or for the participant companies to be found to be thought leaders and leadership in their sectors. So what virtual has done has provided a huge opportunity for your partners to position themselves as educators of knowledge and of thought leadership. And those expectations have skyrocketed on the virtual side, though the visit my booth has had lower than desired expectations. Networking has a long way to go, but can we create some innovative new ways? Absolutely we can, but we have to also be able to measure ROI. So these are the things that when we look at creativity and innovation, it's not just about creating a game. It's not about just plunking in augmented reality. It's not about just setting up a virtual trade show. It's about understanding it, working it, and managing it. We need to be looking at those outdated systems of the way we used to do walks, the way we used to do golf tournaments, the way we used to do runs and galas, and start thinking differently. Because we may find that we're running virtual galas for the next 2 years or 3 years, even though we may or may not have a vaccine. So technology becomes, and creativity and innovation becomes very critical in today's world of sponsorship, tomorrow's, and in the future. So the last of the 5 areas I wanted to touch on is the reality of advice. And this is where we need to truly understand that advice is critical at this time. We need to be able to go to professionals and get support. We're making some changes within our own company. We're looking at launching some new products come the new year. We're looking at an update on our website. All of these things we're not going to do solely by ourselves. We've got outside help to help us. because those are the experts in technology side and in e-commerce and in those sorts of things. So what I look at is every one of you, whether you're a brand or you're a property, or whether you're an agency, you have a business to run. So don't think that you have to do everything. Outsource what you can. So I use the example of social and digital media. We've talked a lot about that. If you're going to add TikTok, you're going to add some new platforms, you're going to become way more engaged on the social side, then you need to build, as I said, that capacity. And maybe you need to outsource that. Maybe you need to get that capacity by hiring a third-party company, a company like Chimp Agency or somebody like that, that's going to manage your marketing for you from a social perspective and your content and your voice, because you don't have the capacity to do it in-house. Or maybe you just need to get somebody to come in and build your strategy and your plan and work with you based on your own new culture versus the old culture. When we start to look at those things, that's what I mean about going out to get advice. We need to look at timelines. What can we achieve if we do ourselves? What can we achieve if we have somebody do this for us? You have to be able to run your operation, and you need to be able to, a lot of us don't have time to do the research. So when I look at this, 45-minute presentation that I'm going to deliver you today, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers, there's close to 60 hours of research that has gone into this. Close to 60 hours of attending other webinars, attending other conferences, reading, looking at all the newest data, all the IMI reports, all the stuff that's come from different research firms, to be able to put together a presentation for you that can be delivered in 45 minutes with knowledge, with statistical, empirical data, and all of those sorts of things. Do you have 60 hours to do that research? Probably not. That's why you came to this webinar, so that in 45 to 60 minutes, you can get what you need. That is the reality of accepting and taking advice from somebody else. It means being prepared to invest and lose the ego that you think you can do it all, because you can't. You have an organization to run. Do what you do best. And that might be raising money for a cause. It might be running a sport organization. It might be running a not-for-profit. It might be operating a brand and all of those sorts of things. You don't have all the answers. And there are companies out there in every field that you're working in, every single area, from data collection to data understanding, that you can actually turn around and get the help you need. I'll use the example of the MS Society, and they had a ton of data, but they engaged us to help them to filter that data so that they could understand who they should be calling on as sponsors. And that allowed them to generate a series of new companies that they would be talking to as a result of this data that they already had, but now they knew how to use it, and was laid out for them to be able to talk to new companies that they never would have been rapping on their doors. Those are the types of experiences that if they tried to do that in-house, they'd still be working on it. So the scenario is that you need to seek advice from the professionals in whatever sector that is, whether it's in social, whether it's specifically in sponsorship, prospecting, whether it's in sponsorship, inventory development, valuation, proposal building. Those are the types of things that get the help that you need, because for you to try to do all of that and go out and sell sponsorships is going to kill you. That it's too much in a time that we're in right now. And if you're a brand, how are you going to measure that ROI? Who's going to put together those metrics? How are you going to do that research? Maybe you need to hire IMI to do that research, or Enigma Research, or whoever it is, Gallup. Let them do those things so that you can focus on your business, but take the advice that's out there. So beyond those 5 scenarios, beyond those 5 pivotal points that I think that each one of us have to accept these realities for the today, tomorrow, and the future, I want to look at dispelling a couple of myths. There's lots of myths out there about the vaccination will be the silver bullet. The vaccination won't be the silver bullet. That there is an opportunity, everything's going to go back to normal or whatever. There's lots of myths, lots of storytelling. And I want to dispel a couple of those myths, not all of them, but I want to address two statements and let you know why I think that they're truly myths. The first one is the myth that everything will return to a pre-COVID normal. The answer to that, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty clear. Sorry, it ain't gonna happen. We are not going back to a pre-COVID normal. I don't care what you think, it's not going to happen. Technology has moved us on a trajectory that we were already heading, as I said before, but what would have taken 8 to 10 years has shifted us in 8 months. So as a result, that technology has moved us so quickly, we're not going to go back to where we were before. What was before is now a story in the history books. So we need to start understanding that the spending and the activations that were occurring in 2019, those aren't going to happen right away. Activation is going to look very different, but we have the chance to mold that, prepare that, custom build it for our own property or our own sponsors. We need to be looking at those types of things. We need to also understand that the money that those brands were spending with us in 2019 definitely didn't happen in 2020 and probably won't happen in 2021. We're evolving right now like we should be, but it's at a faster pace than we were ever normally would have accepted. And virtual is here to stay forever. The new way of doing things, digital, social integration, holding concerts, walks, and conferences differently is a new reality. And those are our new world. We are never, ever going back to the way it was. There are bits and pieces that we will keep, but they'll be integrated into a new world. When you stop to look at sport management, event management, marketing courses and textbook, that way that it used to be is just like what fax machines once were and landlines. Those have gone the way of the dodo bird, and the way we used to do things has gone the way of the dodo bird, just way quicker. And the vaccine will help, but it won't be the silver bullet or the goose that lays the golden egg. A couple more myths. But everyone has said that as soon as the malls open, we will be there and they will be busy. As soon as the theaters open, every data said in May, June, saying as soon as those malls open, as soon as the theaters open, they'll be full again. Everybody wants to go shopping. Everybody needs to socially integrate. Guess what? It didn't happen. The malls got busy, but not really busy. The restaurants were limited to the number of seats you could use. Hours had changed. Outdoor activities were bigger than indoor activities. The world has changed and we need to accept that. So when I look at it, the second myth that I want to look at is that everything will be okay and it will all be rosy in the end. And I'm sorry to say this, but it won't be. The reality is that there will be losses, there will be droughts of cash, and there will be casualties. That is just a reality. And it will be the organizations that adapt, that are able to be fluid, that will survive and then thrive. We're going to see a lot more of the merging. We're going to see a lot more of that integration. We look at organizations that have merged together that once were competitors. And I look at the Boys and Girls Club in Calgary and the other organization, and the two of them merged together. I've heard of 4 or 5 other mergings coming up in the next few months that'll be announced. Why? Because that's the only way we're going to be able to thrive and survive. So we need to be looking. There are going to be casualties. The dollars that you were getting in 2019, you're probably not getting in 2021. Be blessed if you get half. and it will take several years before we get back to those 2019 levels. And in fact, the numbers that I've seen and the messages that I've seen, the airline industries don't expect to reach 2019 numbers till 2026. So understand that everything's not going to be okay. But those that will adapt, those that will serve, will be the ones that survive and thrive. I hate to be that downer, but this is a reality check. And what you can do to be successful is really pretty simple. If you want to be successful, what you want to look at is these next 5 steps that we've talked about for the last 45 or 50 minutes. The 5 realities going forward are: you have to have a reality of understanding your audience today way more in depth than you ever did before. And that's your direct audience, your partners, and the audience of the fans, the consumers, those people. Understand that virtual is not going anywhere. Digital is only going to increase. Virtual is going to increase. Social is going to increase. Start to adapt, start to integrate it. Number 3, that the relationship needs to be, as we talked about, understand the reality of our audiences better. That comes through a deeper understanding of our relationships with our partners. We need to be way more creative and innovative, but not just for innovation's sake. It needs to be right, and we need to have the capacity put in place to deliver on that creativity and that innovation. And we need the reality check of acquiring and accepting advice when it's made available to us or when we seek it out. And to wrap up, I just want you to understand that here's what I believe that new reality is: that we need to be an open, adaptive, fluid. We need to know our audience, embrace change with technology, innovation, and support while we're deepening those relationships. Thank you very much. Thanks for connecting with me. Thanks for being part of this session. I look forward to hopefully having you back and participating with Christy Cruz in December. And then I'm very excited to be on that panel in January. And then I know there's another great session with the sponsorship guy in February, and another one in March that'll be a really storytelling, exciting session. So I plan on attending those last 2 and participating in the next 2. And thank you very much to TimeWise. Thank you very much for making all of this happen at a time when we need it, and at a time when we need that information. Aaron, I'm going to turn this all back to you right now and open up to any questions that there may be.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brent. That was very, very enlightening. Always a wonderful session from you. So many things that come to my mind when I think about what you just delivered, but this concept of this new normal that, we just can't wait for normal to return. We really do truly have to adapt and really capitalize on the opportunities that are presented themselves today. And then how do we move forward on those? We've got some really great questions that have come in related to some of the topics that you've covered today. So one of them actually speaks about the value of relationships. We've been talking for years and years about how important relationships are in this industry. But we've been for many years focusing on the relationship really between the partner or the property and the brand. But really what you've identified is a really unique opportunity to really focus on the end user, but how that really changes the dynamic between the partners. So tell us what changes in terms of the data that needs to be shared to have this deep understanding.
Well, that's a really, really good question, Erin. And I think that before we look at the data, we coined this about 4 or 5 years ago. We called it the Trinity or the trilogy of sponsorship. And as you identified really clearly, you identified it as, it used to be about the partner, like the sponsor and the property, and they would do a deal. But today it's like three legs on a stool. We need to understand that there's really 3 partners, and that third partner is the audience, whether that's the fan, whether it's the donor, whether it's the participant, whether it's the subscriber. I don't care who it is, the consumer themselves. But that they have to be integrated into this. And as I said, we need to understand that audience so much better for a couple of reasons. One, we need to understand that so we can deliver a better product. But number 2, they have a voice now. That group has a huge voice. and it comes through social media. So when we start to look at what the data is that we need in that third group, is to look at them and going, how are they actually engaging? Are they engaging on 2, 3, or 4 screens, or are they watching this solely on one screen? Are they interacting immediately? So if they're on 2 screens and a messaging is around a sponsor's product that's integrated into a production on a theater stage, are they actually going to that sponsor's webpage to look at the product right now? And are there purchases that are immediate? That data can be found. When we look at something like the MS Society, and they have an amazing program with A&W every single summer. And it's buy a teen burger and $1 goes to the MS Society for research. And it's raised millions of dollars. There's a huge spike when we look at the data and we understand the data better. When we look at it in the month of August, the supporters of MS, those people that participate in their walk and their bike, and the people that donate to the bike and the walk, they spike huge for going to A&W. Not any other time of year, but definitely in August. So that tells us a whole bunch of data and it's empirical data that shows us this. And that shows us that the information is there to know that we're moving our audience. We know that they'll support us, and they will go and support our partners. Now we have to get them to buy A&W teen burgers or A&W products for the other 11 months of the year.
Exactly. All right, so there's another question about relationships and this shift, because we've blurred the lines between kind of business and personal now that everybody's online. So someone asked an interesting question about, can you take this too far? Is it too far to engage somebody in a partnership and do something that might be slightly personal?
So my quick answer off the top is absolutely not. The true world of developing relationships from a professional business to business perspective is about getting deep in that relationship. And I'm going to throw our example. I mean, if you take a look at it, it was 15 or so years ago that we met. You were working at Westerner Park. We were doing the inventory and the valuation. And today we have a great relationship. We had breakfast the other day where, I know about the family. I know what's going on in your life. You know what's going on in my life. That is developed. And that is because of the business side, but also the personal side. You won't get that deep of a relationship with every one of your partners, but the ones that you can, there isn't that. I don't believe that line is gray. It is gray for a reason. It's not black and white. And when we start to look at that type of scenario, it's pretty interesting. When we take a look at somebody like the Ryan Reynolds and the Haley Wickenheisers, who were brought on board to support a COVID-19, help us find more PPE. This was back in April and May, and get that product into the hands of healthcare workers. And that was done by a volunteer. And it wasn't sponsorship, but it was about people's lives and how they're being affected. And I think we look at those scenarios that, we have a chance to take relationships to where they should be. And we've been preaching about this for years as a company to our clients, but it's becoming a true reality now.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. So another question just popped up for you. So I'm wondering if you have seen any exceptional examples of sponsorship and partnerships being launched, developed during COVID, and what made these stand out or successful in your opinion?
Well, I think one of the ones that I mentioned during this session, and it's not a Canadian one, but it was amazing. It was the Louisville Bats. It's a semi-pro team in Louisville, and they're a baseball team. And they created, using augmented reality, ironically, the augmented reality app company is based out of Vancouver. It's a Canadian company. And what they did was they created a scavenger hunt for, as I said, for all of their restaurants that were partners with the baseball club, and asked people to order from those, like their fans. They said to their fans, please order your meals from our partners. And you could enter to win. And you can use the augmented reality app, just download it and put Batty, that's the mascot, in the picture in front of. Every time you pick up your food at one of these restaurants, take the picture with Batty in it, and you'll be entered to win. This did two things. Number one, it drove huge volumes of traffic to their restaurant partners. Number two, it taught their fans how to use an augmented reality app. So when they get them back in the stadium, they can be using that app. And they can run so many more promotions and experiences online instead of just activations on the field or in the stands. So that's probably one of the best. I look at different galas that have done a fantastic job of shifting over and going into a virtual situation and retaining all their sponsors. So the Vancouver Island Economic Summit Conference in Nanaimo last month did a great job of retaining all their sponsors. They integrated their sponsors even more into the thought leadership side. And that retained the dollars and delivered amazing content for all the people that came to that conference on a virtual scenario.
Very cool. Great example. So let's talk a little bit about this creativity and innovation and technology that's really needed. So are we seeing a shift in the industry? Are there actually new positions being added to organizations or changes in how organizations are looking at existing positions, knowing that there's been this shift and it's really a different skill set that's required than what has been required previously?
Well, I think the people that have led this, as always, is the sport franchises, the pro sports franchises. And yes, they do have the staff and the capacity in-house. But the slow to adopt has been the not-for-profits, the charities, the arts organizations. And they're adapting right now because they have to. But they're not building out that capacity. And so most of them are utilizing third parties.
Yeah.
They will eventually build in-house capacity. And I believe that's the way to go. Unless they've got the funding to hire the qualified person to run their social program. You know, if you want to run a better social program, you need to get better people doing it. You need to be doing it or if you have the experience in-house, it can't be that's 25% of their job description. It has to be 50 or 75 or 100%. And then you need to replace the other activities that they were doing. And so that's probably the shift that we're seeing when you start to look at I'm just using the augmented reality program, for example. How many organizations have an expert in augmented reality? Nobody. So you better be outsourcing that. And I go back and I compare it to a lot of and I'm going to use charities as an example. 15 years ago, if you said to a charity, hey, do you have an online program for generating revenue for donations? Yeah, you can do it on our website. Mm-hmm. But today, it is not something on the website. It is the website. And it is, texting $50. And that technology-based giving has staffs of 2 and 3 or 10 or 15 in very large organizations. That would, if you told somebody in the not-for-profit sector or the charitable sector 15 years ago, they would have a staff of 15 running their technology side for donations, they would say, you probably believe George Jetson and his boy Leroy are real, that type of thing. So
yeah, no, absolutely. So your last point was around this concept of expert advice and knowing when and who you need to engage. So for many people on our call today, they might have trouble getting buy-in from, senior leadership or someone in the organization that they need to make an investment. So as a consultant yourself, what advice do you have them? How do they sell this internally?
Another really good question. I would say from all my experience, and this is, as you said, we're consultants, so we're trying to sell our services to somebody. And I believe what we're doing and everybody else should be doing, but doing it in-house. And that is to build for case for support, which includes measured ROI. So if I go back to that, the example of we do some work in prospect development, it's expensive work. You want to hire us to figure out who you should be calling on, utilizing Envirotics data and so forth and so on. It's going to cost you $50,000 to $80,000. That's a big ticket item. Who the heck has $50,000 lying around? But if you can show that the projection is that if we were able to find 5 additional companies that we aren't calling on presently, and they were to be investing $35,000 a year on average for 5 years, that's, I'm not good at math, but it's probably around $750,000 in revenue.
Yeah.
And if they spent, $75,000, that's a 10% cost of sale. And that's only in the first 10 years return on investment.
Yeah.
Now that's a pretty good investment. Or if you need to hire a social media person, or you need to hire one of those people, show what the potential is. If we increase our social media presence, this is how much more money we can get from our sponsors. This is how much more donations we can get. This is how much more partnerships we can get from government, and show those dollars and cents as an outcome. But here's what the investment needs to be to get to there. Most boards, if there is a strong case for support that has empirical data that shows the ROI, they will agree. And if they don't, I would say it's time to be looking for another job, because that organization is probably not going to be around for much longer.
Yeah, great.
Sorry, probably not the answer you wanted on the tail end there, but.
Well, no, but it's reality, right? This is a reality check. So another question just came in. So this organization, they've made the decision to kind of shelf any asks during COVID times. So the question is, when is the right time to talk about money again, about renewals or new partnerships, if at all?
And I'm guessing that this is some sort of organization that's probably doing, by the sounds of that description, probably looking at donors and sponsors. And my answer to that is, I think you made a big mistake. I think you should have been talking money all the way back in April and continue to do it. But I said, I'm not going to dwell on the past. So let's go forward. Is that you should be talking, I'm just going to focus on sponsors right now, but there is a very much a parallel strategy with donors. You should be talking, you should have been talking, continue to talk to your partners right now. So in talking to them, understanding their business, understanding their situation, deepening those relationships. But in that process, you may find out that they can't renew for 2020. They can't probably renew for 2021. Now you know that talk about renewal and discussion around revenue, that ain't happening. But what can we do to support them in the meantime? Because come 2022, we think they'll be back. Alternatively, you might be talking to them and they might be talking about the fact that they've got a new product that was in the works and they need to be launching it in Q4 of 2021. How can we help them? Yeah. And how much do you have to invest to launch that new product? Or it might be about that they're doing a whole bunch of work in the community. Maybe they need to be telling that story so that they can recruit more staff because there is growth. And not every single brand right now is losing money. There are lots of them making money.
Absolutely.
So this is the time to be asking them for new deals. I can tell you that we spent 4 hours with a client yesterday on strategy, one-on-one with them in Edmonton, a team, and we're talking about they're got to go back to market, and where they've got 3 years left, and we're doing with another client right now the same thing, where they have sponsors that have renewals coming up in a year or 2 years. Well, that sponsor really got no coverage, no exposure in 2020. So what are we building for a plan? Let's talk to them and find out what their needs are. Are they interested in renewal? So maybe we sign a new 10-year deal starting in January 2021 or July 2021 that bonuses them for the entire 2020 and 2019, and the new payments don't start till 2022. I don't know what it looks like for individual organizations. Everybody's going to be different, but can you survive for a year without that revenue as a property? And can you help them, or can you throw that in at the back end And in the 10-year deal, they're only paying for 8, but it is a 17% increase because they haven't had an increase in 10 years. You know, there's a whole bunch of options there, but if you don't talk to your partners, you won't know when the right time to talk about money is.
Yeah, again, I think it just comes back to relationships and having that deep understanding of that relationship and where things are at, and understanding of their business and what they're hoping to achieve from the relationship as well.
That was good.
Perfect. I think that actually wraps up our questions for today. So thank you everybody so much for being here for Brent's presentation. I hope you took away as much as I did from the presentation. A reminder to everyone that this is a series, so this is the first of 6. So we've got another session coming up on December 16th, again with Brent Brudy's, with Christy Cruz from TELUS. And I think, Brent, you mentioned you guys are going to be talking about giving some examples of the worst and the best examples of some sponsorships and some partnerships. So looking forward to that as well. And that about wraps up today. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.